Okay, good morning, everyone, and good morning to the media houses, the journalists that are joining us here. Good morning to South Africans that are joining us at home and watching this. My name is Louis Olompiti, and today the DA will be making a special announcement. Joining me for this particular announcement is Dr. Ivan Meyer, who is the DA federal chairperson of the party. I also have the DA Head of Policy, Matthew Cuthbert. Also with me is Alexandra Abrams, who is the spokesperson of social development in Parliament. We will be making this announcement off the cuff of years of South Africans facing disparities from this economy, South Africans facing the brunt of failure and corruption for the past 30 years. And we believe that today this announcement is a step in the right way to help South Africans in our country. I would like to ask Alexandra Abrams to give us an address and share their inputs on this announcement. Thank you very much.
Good morning to the journalists present here today and to South Africans watching at home. I want to talk to you about a crisis. And this is not just an economic crisis, but a human one, a deeply personal one, and a painful one. Millions of South Africans wake up each day in search for work, and many have given up on searching for work, worried about how they will keep the lights on, how they will keep food on their table. This is the daily reality of more than 12 million South Africans. Our official unemployment rate stands at 33%. Our youth unemployment rate stands at 46%. That is not just a statistic. That is your brother, your sister, your neighbor, and your child. That is the young woman with a diploma in hand, handing out CVs and after 2 years, still unemployed. South Africa has become a country where the hope of a job dies quietly, in queues, in homes, and in silence. And that is not just young people. It is mothers and fathers. It is grandparents who are supporting entire households on their pensions and on their old age grants, as they watch the cost of their groceries go up for fewer items each month. This is not just a jobs crisis, it is a dignity crisis, because without work, you lose more than just an income. You lose your pride, your independence, your sense of self-worth. Over 28 million South Africans now depend on a social grant. That's almost half of our country's population. This figure should be higher, but many who are eligible to receive a social grant struggle to access it due to logistics, such as high transport costs to get to a SASSA office to apply, or with a 370 grant stuck in an appeals process forever pending. No parent can raise a child on 560 Rand for a child support grant, and no young person dreams of queuing for 370 Rand. These grants are important, and it keeps people from starving, but it is not a future, and it is not dignity. The real tragedy of our economy, the real face of poverty, it's our children. 28.8%, or 1 in every 4 children under the age of 5 in our country is stunted due to chronic malnutrition. That means children are growing up with permanent developmental challenges because they are not getting enough to eat. In a Food for Thought Reflections on Food Insecurity report, 23% of households are in severe food poverty. That's not just a little hungry. That's they do not know where their next meal is coming from. In just the first 4 months of this year, 4,759 children were admitted to public hospitals with moderate or severe acute malnutrition. In the past 18 months, 973 children under 5 years of age died with severe acute malnutrition as the underlying causes in our public facilities. This was revealed in the South African Human Rights Commission subpoena hearings earlier in September. In a country rich with resources, how do we allow children to go hungry, robbed of their potential? How did we allow 973 children to die without consequence? We are not just losing jobs, we are losing futures and we are losing lives. This is not normal, and this is the direct result of failed economic policies that cater to a few while leaving the millions of South Africans stuck in generational poverty. Last week, I was in the Ilembe district of KZN with the Portfolio Committee of Social Development. In Mandini, we had a public meeting. The Lindiwe Shabalala Hall was full of people from various ages. All spoke of their pain and suffering due to unemployment and poverty. There was a grown woman who is a qualified teacher who broke down in tears because her mother passed without her ever seeing her hold a job. There was a qualified social worker who told us how difficult it is to encourage the youth to study further when they turn to her and say, "But you studied and you unemployed, so what is the point?" A father whose pain and anger silenced the hall and brought officials to tears. His story is one of many. He got retrenched and never found work again. His wife died and left him to raise children, girls. He tells his girls every day that whatever you need, even if it's sanitary pads, you come to me. And his reason was he doesn't want his girls to go and sell their bodies to support for basic necessities that a father is meant to supply. Questioning why his brothers and friends died in the struggle when him and everyone in that room is still struggling today. We visited a rural village in Ishawe and told of a home where a husband hits his wife. The community later found out that home has no food. A husband angry and frustrated because he cannot provide. Not an excuse, but the reality in many homes. That village has since adopted a one home, one food garden policy. Another father told us how he hated us. He hated politicians, he hated parliament, he hated government. Why? Because he doesn't have work to provide for his family. Because 30 years into democracy, the promise of dignity for all has not materialized for all. This hate and discontent is growing, and we see it at the ballot boxes. South Africans have had enough of watching the politically connected few get rich. They want a government that puts jobs at the center of everything, and they want policies that support businesses and not strangle them. They want the doors of opportunity to be open for everyone to have a fair shot. And South Africans want a government that says, work is the way out of poverty, not welfare, not handouts, work. Because work gives you more than just money. It gives you freedom. Work gives you dignity, and work gives you a future. In closing, there is a quiet suffering in this country that can never be measured by statistics. I see it, and I know you see it too. It's in the eyes of a mother who cannot feed her children tonight. It is in the weight of the shoulders of a father who feels like he has failed his family. It is in the eyes of hungry children at almost every street traffic light. And it is in the silence of a young graduate who has given up that tomorrow will be better. To change this social picture, we have to change the economic picture. If we change the economy, we can change the lives of people. And if we put people to work, we can restore their dignity. Thank you. I would now like to hand over to our Head of Policy, Matthew Cuthberg.
Good morning, South Africans, members of the media and colleagues. Since launching the Democratic Alliance's plan to turbocharge the economy 2 months ago, in which we highlighted key roadblocks to growth and job creation, we now present the Economic Inclusion for All Bill. This bill aims to replace years of ineffective ANC empowerment policies that have left the vast majority of South Africans unemployed, impoverished, and hopeless. Around 44 million of our citizens are stuck in poverty. 12 million are stranded in unemployment queues, and our country remains the most unequal place on earth. This is not the inclusive country we envisioned building when we lined up to vote on the 27th of April, 1994. Since the ANC's BEE policy was first introduced in 2003, conditions have significantly worsened for the people it claims to represent. The unemployment rate for black South Africans was 36% in the last quarter of 2024, compared to 7% amongst white South Africans. From 2014 to 2024, the black unemployment rate increased by 9 percentage points, while the white unemployment rate decreased by 1%. According to the March 2025 Household Affordability Index, approximately 64% of black South Africans are living below the upper bound poverty line of 1,634 Rand per person per month. This means that nearly 30 million black South Africans are trapped in poverty out of a total population of 52 million. Instead of redressing the injustices of the past, this policy has created a feeding trough for ANC cadres who have benefited at the expense of the poor and the vulnerable. According to Professor William Gumede of the Wits School of Governance, conservatively 1 trillion Rand has been moved between under 100 people since 1994. The same people have been empowered and re-empowered over and over again. He also stated that South Africa's BEE model has created a model of corruption because people set up companies just to get a contract. Perhaps the most notorious example of this disastrous policy is the 54 billion Rand locomotive procurement scandal, which was investigated by the Zondo Commission into State Capture, which revealed just the extent of how political connections enable widespread corruption and looting. In this particular case, Transnet unlawfully inflated the price of a 2014 contract to procure 1,064 locomotives from 39 billion Rand to 54 billion Rand in order to favor Chinese suppliers and channel over 6 billion Rand in kickbacks to Gupta-linked companies under the pretense of transformation. The BEE model has become a key driver of corruption within our society. We have witnessed this in the wide-scale looting of approximately 2 billion Rand from Tembisa Hospital and the murder of Ekurhuleni Metropolitan Municipality's chief auditor, Mpho Mafole, after submitting a scathing report relating to 1.8 billion Rand in chemical toilet tenders. This clearly demonstrates how successive ANC administrations have failed to address the root causes of inequality by implementing crude race-based procurement policies to benefit themselves at the expense of the people. The DA is firmly committed to redressing the injustices of the past by removing all barriers to accessing economic opportunities and delivering real empowerment for all South Africans. Our Economic Inclusion Bill for All seeks to amend the Public Procurement Amendment Act of 2024 to repeal all race-based preferential procurement provisions and replace them with a real empowerment system that targets poverty as a proxy for disadvantage instead of race. This bill aims to create a public procurement system that encourages genuine economic empowerment by offering incentives for tangible developmental outcomes such as job creation, poverty reduction, skills enhancement, and environmentally sustainable practices. We aim to reform South Africa's public procurement framework by aligning it with Section 217 of the Constitution, which governs public procurement. And this requires that all state organs must contract for goods and services in a system that is fair, in a system that is equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. Our alternative model aligns with the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which serve as a universal call to action for government, business, and civil society to end poverty, address inequality, and create a pathway towards sustainable economic growth by 2030. The bill removes provisions for set-asides, pre-qualification criteria, subcontracting conditions, and local content designations, and replacing these measures with an outcomes-driven system centered on inclusive development and value-for-money procurement. Furthermore, the transitional measures in the bill include the winding down of the BEE Commission over 12 months and the systematic removal of references to BEE across legislation. To give effect to this change, the bill empowers the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition to develop a simplified preference point system based on suppliers' demonstrated contributions to inclusive development and social impact. The DA's alternative scorecard comprises three components. Firstly, value for money. Secondly, economic inclusion. And thirdly, disqualification criteria. The value for money component assesses cost effectiveness, technical capacity, and the reliability of bidders, which accounts for 80%. The economic inclusion component assesses bidders' demonstrable contributions to the SDGs across 5 key categories, such as human development, economic empowerment, environmental sustainability, inclusive communities, and a mixed impact option, which accounts for 20%. The disqualification criteria excludes bidders if there is a proven record of fraud, corruption, or misrepresentation. Instead of granting nominal ownership of foreign and local businesses to ANC cadres, the DA's alternative aims to empower all South Africans who lack access to economic opportunities by focusing on the following: human development activities such as feeding schemes, scholarships, and early childhood development; economic empowerment activities, including local hiring, small business development, and women's empowerment initiatives; environmental sustainability projects such as renewable energy, recycling, and reforestation investments; and lastly, inclusive community and governance initiatives like legal aid centers, urban greening, and NGO partnerships. I want to tell you today that the DA's approach to empowerment fundamentally differs from that of the ANC. While the ANC's policy is exclusive to cadres, the DA's policy demands no political connections. Under the ANC, race is the sole criterion, whereas the DA emphasizes needs-based empowerment. The ANC encourages fronting culture, while the DA promotes social impact and value for money in procurement. And while the ANC continues to exclude small businesses, the DA considers small businesses vital partners in the fight against unemployment. So while the ANC is preoccupied with increasing red tape and compliance, the DA seeks to reduce red tape, boost social investment, and foster economic growth. Despite growing evidence of BEE's failures, the ANC continues to defend it because of their vested interests. One only needs to look at their president and much of their senior leadership to realize this. This is why the DA is using its position in the government of national unity and parliament to oppose this harmful policy and promote genuine empowerment that uplifts the disadvantaged, unlocks opportunity, and delivers prosperity. The DA may be in coalition with the ANC in government, but that doesn't mean that we need to agree with them all the time. We are in the GNU to represent the interests of all South Africans, and we will not relent. As a party that cares deeply for our country and its people, it angers us to see how the ANC has used state resources to line its pockets instead of delivering much-needed services and upliftment to the people. But it doesn't have to be this way. By strengthening the DA's hand in government, we can bring good governance to more national departments, deliver services, and create a more prosperous South Africa for all. So join us in our fight against elite enrichment to promote a policy that aims to redress the injustices of the past, turbocharge our economy, and create jobs. Achieving economic inclusion for all is within our reach, and today marks the start of that journey. So get behind our bill and help us dismantle this exclusionary system that has prioritized ANC cadres over the people of our nation. South Africa deserves better, and under a DA-led government, they will get it. It is now incumbent upon the ANC to recognize that its failed policies no longer enjoy the same public support as they did before. South Africans seek genuine empowerment rather than trickle-down redress, and therefore we formally call on the ANC to do the right thing by prioritizing the needs of the poor and the vulnerable instead of their cadres. I thank you. I would now like to hand over to our federal chairperson, Dr. Ivan Meyer.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, South Africa, and thank you for joining us here at this very important and very historic press conference, because for us, as Matt Cuthbert has outlined today, this policy is not just only a policy choice. This is South Africa's chance for economic justice, real empowerment, and a shared prosperity. For us, it is important that we also today remind people that for the last 30 years, we have listened to the State of the Nation address. And for the last 30 years, we are tired of listening to the triple challenges of poverty, because under the ANC, poverty has increased due to corruption, cadre deployment, and as Matt Cuthbert has mentioned, political connections. BEE is nothing but state-sponsored corruption, fraud, theft by cadres who are politically connected. BEE makes people poorer, and we have the evidence of that. We've also seen what BEE has just recently done within the Tembisa Hospital, the Prasa tender case, and also live now on television happening in front of us at this South African Police Committee of Inquiry and Commission of Inquiry. We know for the last 30 years we have seen that BEE has made ordinary South Africans poor, and as my colleagues have indicated, it is a painful experience to see people not being able to get a job where it is possible to get a job with the right policies. But we all know that corruption by the state never happens by accident. It is by design, carefully designed, military executed by the ANC. It is not an accident. BEE is state-sponsored corruption, and it's not an accident. It is designed to enrich a few politically connected people. We also know that annually the supply chain management of public procurement by government is in the region of 1 trillion rand a day. We also know that public procurement happens every single day in South Africa. We also know that BEE through the public procurement happens every single day. So it is fair to say that public corruption through BEE in the Public Procurement Act happens every day in South Africa, and people are suffering, and we're at enough. But people are also tired of hearing about BEE. They are asking, what is your alternative? They know BEE is state-sponsored corruption, theft, and fraud. They are asking us, what is your alternative for real empowerment, mass-based empowerment, and not small elite? They are looking for an alternative, and today we are presenting that alternative. This is what Matt Cuthbert has just simply done through this new public procurement inclusive bill, because we know BEE exclude the majority of people in South Africa. And so today we are proposing major policy reforms to replace, in fact, to end BEE, because we believe real empowerment happens through structural reform of the economy, and this bill is part of our proposals for structural reform, because it deals with real reform of putting first economic growth that will lead to jobs. Because we know and we have evidence that BEE kills jobs. So this is economic reform that will grow the economy and create more jobs. So we're replacing and ending BEE and apply an internationally recognized, proven track record system of the United Nations by employing the Sustainable Development Goals, which are being used all over the world for real empowerment, and end the BEE today. Today we submit economic policy proposals really to grow the economy and end this ideological madness of BEE. We today believe that we must show real signs of caring for South Africans who cannot find a job. That caring is important for us, in terms of this bill, because this bill is inclusive, not exclusive, because we care for the people of South Africa. We cannot simply have an ideological debate for the last 30 years about BEE. The universal consensus in South Africa is that we must have practical or pragmatic proposals. And today we have tabled pragmatic proposals to build an inclusive economy not based on race. And so for us, we fully understand Section 217 of the Constitution, which Matt Cuthbert has eloquently read, and I want to consult the Constitution again. It says, when an organ of state in a national, provincial, or local sphere of government or any other institution identified in national legislation contracts for goods and services, it must do so in accordance with a system that is equitable, that is transparent, that is competitive, and that is cost-effective. Our proposals are in line with the provisions of the Constitution. BEE is not in line with the provisions of the Constitution in terms of the provisions of Section 217 of the Constitution. And that's why the Western Cape government, a DA-led government, has taken the Public Procurement Act to the Constitutional Court. I have received confirmation that the Constitutional Court has received our application. Our affidavit has been sent to the relevant people, and they are having time until the 27th of November to reply to that affidavit. As a DA government, we are looking forward to challenge the Public Procurement Act next year in 2026, because we believe in real empowerment, real economic growth that can lead to job creation, because we have an apex priority in the Democratic Alliance, and that is to grow the economy and create more jobs, because we believe we have to care for citizens in South Africa. Today is not an ordinary press conference. This is history in the making, because for the first time, we now have a real chance within the GNU to scrap BEE and end poverty and introduce an inclusive economic model that is internationally tested through the Sustainable Development Goals that will guarantee economic growth and guarantee job creation so that we can simply wipe out poverty. Thank you very much. I now hand back to the Program Director.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mayor, and to colleagues, Matthew Cuthbert, as well as Alexandra Abrams. Colleagues, we are going to request, if there are a round of a Q&A for our panelists or our guests who are with me here on stage. So may I just ask that we start off with 3 questions for the first round, and one, indicate who the question is being directed to, and secondly, to indicate where we are, which media house we are also from, so that we can give that opportunity, and then we'll take it from there. So we'll start with the first 3 hands. Usamkelo, Putmoloto, and then Usisipa. So the first 3, and then we'll hand over to the responses. Thank you very much.
Samkele Masego from the SABC. My question is directed to the head of policy, Matt Cuthbert. The economic inclusion bill, it speaks nothing about ownership, management control, and equity participation, because those are what actually speaks to the structural reforms, where we've seen a large number of South Africans whom we've economically deprived in the past still are not properly and equitably represented within the ownership patterns of the economy of the country, and also the management roles, particularly if you look at the financial sector of the country, which is still largely white Afrikaner male dominated. Thank you.
Thank you. Muluku Moloto from ENC. From what I'm hearing you to be saying, it seems the sore point here, particularly in the implementation of triple BEE, is corruption. Do you think if you were to remove corruption out of triple BEE, there's anything positive out of it? I mean, your critics are going to say there has been an increase in the black middle class, and that could be a positive from their point of view. I also want to understand, what do you mean, expand there, when you say BEE is killing jobs? And lastly, I mean, as much as you are introducing this bill, already you know your largest partner in the Government of National Unity, the African National Congress, is not going to vote in support of this. What's the point of introducing a legislation which you know already that in terms of the numbers voting in the plenary, it's not going to be supported?
Thank you. The last hand.
Good morning. My name is Thando Maeko, and I am from the Business Day. Just to the head of policy, Matthew, just how does the DA plan to get its proposed amendments to the public procurement bill to pass through Parliament? Just touching on Muluko's question again, considering that the largest party in Parliament, the ANC, is unlikely to support the proposals. Secondly, and because the Act is being challenged in court by the Western Cape government and other civil society organizations, is this proposal not putting the cart before the horse? Because should you not wait for the court processes to unfold before these proposals? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Matt. Thank you.
You know, it's not a DA press conference unless we have some Kelo and Moloto asking very easy questions, of which we greatly appreciate. But nonetheless, thank you very much for the questions, and I endeavor to give you the best answers that I can. And if you want to do a follow-up afterwards, then we are more than happy to do that. So if we specifically look at ownership controls and the way in which this has functioned, and particularly since the advent of BEE, because we must understand the genesis of BEE was in essence big bite business looking for political entrepreneurs within the ANC in order to maintain the status quo. And this is largely why we find so many South Africans locked out of opportunity. So simply, shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic by trying to give over shares or give over ownership to a company when it is in essence being used as a method for fronting doesn't actually filter down in the way in which the ANC purports it to do. This is why we sit with a black unemployment rate that is significantly higher than other population groups. We sit with a poverty rate that is significantly higher than other population groups. And there's also a disparity within black South Africans in terms of inequality, and the inequality between those in the lower rungs of the LSM versus those in the top of the LSM. So therefore, this model has failed by simply trying to buy out political entrepreneurs instead of getting real development and economic inclusion on the ground. And if you go through the document itself, you will see that there are a wide range of measures to bring small businesses into the value chain, to make sure that they have the necessary infrastructure and the necessary support so that they are able to expand their businesses and not just simply be employees. And that's fundamentally what we need to do in order to be able to create a more just and a more equal South Africa, is to get more people into economic opportunity and allow them to climb up the ladder of social mobility so that they can also live lives of their choosing and lives of meaning. And that's what I think fundamentally differs. Maybe to add further to that, if we look at the equity equivalent, right, which still uses race as its metric, it focuses on several of the initiatives which we have in fact included in the Economic Inclusion for All Bill scorecard. And I think that those are real tangible ways that communities can feel the impact of the businesses in which they operate or that operate within their communities, as opposed to just nominally putting somebody up on a board and saying, well, I've contributed towards transformation. We've seen time and time again in examples of ANC politicians who have benefited by being awarded shares or by being awarded ownership control of a particular business, and it's never ever filtered down. And that's fundamentally where we find there to be a specific issue. And onto Moloto's point regarding, removing the corruption from BE. I'm going to go back to my answer to Samkelo. The whole system was designed as a stitch-up. It was literally a group of big white businessmen sitting in a room with ANC political entrepreneurs. There's many accounts of this that are available on public record, where they set up the system because it was an easy way for them to subvert the exchange controls process and at the same time try and maintain the status quo for big business by simply buying out politicians. It wasn't included in the Freedom Charter. It wasn't included in any other ANC documentation prior to its implementation. This was a creation of big white business itself. And somehow the ANC have very effectively over the years been able to, shall we say, co-opt this into a narrative that they are serious about redressing the injustices of the past. And I think that that's a critical point that we often miss. If we look at the general state of the economy, and we look particularly, during the late 90s up until most probably the end of the 2000s, all of the structural factors were in place in order for us to be able to make sure that black South Africans alongside other South Africans were able to have running water, electricity, a competitive economy, access to quality education, which naturally allowed them to climb up the ladder and to be able to exercise their skills and develop a life for themselves in which they were able to put food on the table, able to progress up the corporate ranks, and ultimately not be held back by all of the structural factors that apartheid had put in place. So I don't think that we must look at these things in isolation, because there are a number of factors. I mean, the economy was growing at 5% at the time because of prudent economic policy, and we must not ascribe the success of the black middle class necessarily to BE, because there's a number of other economic factors that are at play. Then, in terms of BEE killing jobs, if we look at the way in which BEE is implemented, in essence, as a company wants to come and invest in South Africa, it's a tax on arrival. In a country where we have gross fixed capital formation, which is the rate of investment that we plow in towards the economy, we hover below 15%, and this has been the case for the past 10 or so years. We should be closer towards 30 to 35% if we really want to get the economy growing north of 3%. And businesses time and time again have cited the restrictive BEE regulations and the fact that businesses are expected to transfer ownership on arrival in the country, which have made it difficult for businesses to want to invest, for them to be able to expand their businesses and ultimately to be able to employ more South Africans. And I think that that's why it is a critical roadblock in allowing the South African economy to grow. We also know that there's a World Bank study which was produced approximately 2 or 3 years ago that shows that the BEE provisions in the original Public Procurement Act accounted for losses of approximately 70 to 80 billion rand because there was overinflation on tenders. You were paying 10,000 rand, and I use this hypothetically, for skinny jeans, as opposed to making sure that you focus on procuring PPE equipment. And these are the kind of guilt-driven and selfish decisions that were taken by tenderpreneurs, which ultimately impacted on the most poor and vulnerable in our society. And I think it's always important that we remind ourselves of this. Then we get to the political element, and I think this ties in with Moloto's question as well as Tando's question. So our call today is to tell the ANC and put them on terms that public opinion has shifted significantly when it comes to BEE policy. We look at publicly available polling, whether that be the Ipsos poll that was conducted by News24, or we look at IRR polling and a number of other polling houses that have put out people's attitudes towards BEE, and they see it as an opportunity for corruption. They see it as something that locks them out of the economy, that creates unfair access for those who have political connections. And I don't think that the ANC are fully aware or fully want to recognize exactly how much public opinion has changed. So it's in their own interest, in their own electoral fortune's interest, that they get behind our bill and that they support us. We need reform in this space. If we are actively putting in place transformation policies that are not uplifting the people that they purport to uplift, we are strangling our economy from growing, then we've got to say to ourselves, well, we can't keep on doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think most importantly, it's about shifting the conversation within Parliament, it's about shifting the conversation within the government of national unity. It is not a stationary thing, the government of national unity. It's a constant site for political contestation, for policy contestation, and for us to make sure that we are able to influence the policy agenda within their country. There's some members within the ANC, members like Kusela Diko, who responded to one of my statements I put out last week, who thinks that the ANC has the monopoly on power and the monopoly on truth on policy ideas in the GNU. And it doesn't work that way. The DA is not going to stand back and simply lap up what the ANC gives us. We're going to take the fight to them, whether that be in cabinet, whether that be in parliament, in order for us to shift the needle so that we can get the economy to grow and we can get people into jobs. We cannot continue on the vein that we are. In terms of Tando's last question regarding are we putting the cart before the horse? So specifically in the Western Cape and the legal challenge which is before the Constitutional Court, it is predominantly on procedural grounds. And it focuses on the public participation process that was not fully catered for to allow other spheres of government to be able to give input. Our proposal today talks about a total overhaul of the system in itself. And basically what we are doing, we are saying to the ANC, well, you know what, here is our homework sheet. This is what we think would work as a sustainable alternative, and this is what we think that you can put into government regulation in order to be able to make this a policy that includes all South Africans. It would be remiss of us to come here and say, well, we must just scrap BE, we must just get over BE, but there's nothing to replace it. And that's why we've put a lot of time, our team in the policy unit, as well as our colleagues within the party, to make sure that we put together something that is real, something that is evidence-based, and something that we believe has the merits in order to be able to work. It's not about simply scrapping BE. It's about saying, what can we do to replace this with a system that provides for genuine empowerment? And I think that that's something that we've managed to achieve in this document. Thank you.
No, I'm quite happy you answered it.
Thank you very much. So we'll take the next three questions. 1, 2, 3. We'll go with you, sir. There you go.
Thank you so much. Tabi Sokoba from Eyewitness News. I think my question is also for the head of policy. I just want to maybe, if you could just maybe sort of expand on it. I do understand that this policy, it replaces race determination with obviously needs-based empowerment. And when you started your speech, you spoke around how for Black people, that when it comes to employment and other factors, things have been worse. Now, I think we can obviously understand that the reason for BE is obviously to redress the past, and our past was race-based past in terms of that Black people were subjugated under apartheid. And I'm just trying to sort of understand that if you remove race when this was obviously caused by race-based subjugation. So if you remove race from a policy that is meant to empower people, then how does that sort of redress or address those historical imbalances when race is also no longer a factor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nellie Payton from Reuters. I have 2 questions, and this can be for any of the party officials. The first one is, do you think that anyone outside of the DA will support this bill, and have you talked to any other parties about it? And the second question is, I know that the context and the history of BE is very specific to South Africa, but it strikes me that some international readers might see similarities with what's happening, with what the US government is doing in terms of removing a lot of race-based legislation and removing even references to diversity or to affirmative action in some laws. I'm just curious if you see any similarities there or what you think of that comparison. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think there was one more question there.
Good morning, Ndando Tsukwana from Bloomberg News. Just to follow on Nellie's question, can you name the specific parties that you have maybe approached to vote with you on this bill? And what does the process look like following this announcement? And the other one, before this very moment, have you engaged the ANC, your biggest partner in the coalition, about this specific announcement, and what has been the initial response by them, if you have responded to them? If you have not engaged them, why have you not? Thanks very much.
All right, this is the last round, but to be fair, there was a hand, so I will just sneak that hand in because this is the last round, and it will be the last question. Yes, Samga.
Thank you. Mr. Matt, I'm not thoroughly convinced by your response, particularly because you're not responding to this change of the structure of the economic landscape of the country, particularly around ownership. when you look at the past of broad-based black economic empowerment, and you look at how the Bond built up their riches, particularly using public procurement and state-owned enterprises, latching onto my questions of my colleagues, of how do you address a racial past without following these basic, what you term race laws, economic empowerment race laws? For instance, this is the language and terminology used by Donald Trump. Is your economic policy influenced by the shift in geopolitical sense of the emergence of right-wing leaders whom are not for the greater good of empowerment of those who've been disenfranchised in the past? Thank you. Then lastly, on the issues of broad-based black economic empowerment, if you look that it's re-empowering the same individuals over and over again, is it not those whom hold the commanding heights of the economy, which is white male in particular, that are the ones giving these BEE deals to these few select black politically inclined leaders who are also in business? Is it not white business at the end of the day that is the biggest beneficiary of broad-based black economic empowerment? Let's use the current lotteries contract as an example, and other big public procurement contracts within the engineering space within the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will hand over to Dr. Mayer, and then Matthew will close it off for us. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for these questions. I'd very much like to respond to if you remove race or remove black people from the policy, because what we have seen is that we believe in a means test. And there are three current policies that are being implemented, for example, social grants. Nobody asks your race when you apply for a social grant. There's a means test. If you pass that means test, you qualify for the social grant, irrespective of your race. Secondly, NSFAS, it's a means test, irrespective of your race. If you qualify for the means test, if your parents are poor, do not have money or access to money, you will qualify for student support. Well, in the Western Cape, where I'm the MEC for agriculture, when there's drought, I go and do drought assessment, veld assessment. I don't look at the color of the skin of the farmer. Irrespective of the color of the skin of the farmer, if the veld assessment tells me that this is a farmer, his livestock is in severe need for food, that's exactly what we do. We promote non-racial support to our farmers. So there are such policies in government, and we say that policies target the right people who are in need, and this is also the means test, not on the basis of the color of the skin, but on the basis of the need, and that's what we are recommending here today. Also, somebody has asked earlier today about the issue of the party and the state. Well, in the Democratic Alliance, one of the principles of the Democratic Alliance is to respect separation between party and state. And therefore, what the party is doing here today and what the Western Cape government does, it is precisely because of the separation of the principle of the separation between party and state. I think this is definitely incorrect to say that there is a global geopolitical shift and therefore this is what we are doing. Absolutely not. In our policy documents, you will clearly see our commitment, and Matt has referred to it, redress. A second principle is reconciliation. A third principle is diversity. That is built in the architecture of the DA's policy frameworks. And so this is definitely not on the DAI model. This is on the sustainable development of the UN based on inclusiveness. And if you apply this model, for example, if you apply the social grants, not on the basis of race, if you now go and look who are the main beneficiaries, it is black people. You don't need to target black people, you need to target the need. The majority of people who are getting support for the students, look at the books, you don't target the black color of your skin, you target the need. And by the very nature of the majority of people in South Africa being black, they are the main beneficiaries. So I think it is a fallacy. It is incorrect to say that this will not empower them. They will be more empowered because BEE has a narrow focus. And so in terms of whether we will have consulted what is the process within the GNU, well, this is the Democratic Alliance proposal. We have decided that the DA must be distinct from the African National Congress. We are not co-opted in the GNU. We have our own voice, and our voice is clear. We believe in creating a production economy and not a consumption economy. In the ANC, they create a consumption economy. We believe that we need to create a production economy, and BEE is pretty much a consumption economy for a few politically connected people. And so, fundamentally, we believe in redress. We believe in reconciliation, and we believe in diversity in the Democratic Alliance.
Thanks very much for the second round of questions. I think that Dr. Meyer has touched on several of them, so I'll add some light touches there afterwards. I think also just to be categoric, we are a centrist party. I wouldn't consider President Trump's Republican Party to be a centrist party. And as Dr. Meyer said, we have a number of key principles and values such as non-racialism, diversity, redress, which we are firmly committed to as a party. It's why we are the most diverse party in South Africa. And we remain true to those particular values. We are not trying to copycat some rather conservative policies which have been taken in the US and which have been done in a political context in which there's been a backlash against too much state involvement. And I think it's important never to think that the Democratic Alliance is synonymous with the Republican Party. We are not. I think specifically around the process that we have followed. In our launching of the Turbocharge the Economy plan 2 months ago, we indicated that we would be bringing legislation. So I think the ANC are well versed that this is coming. We've not had any one-to-one engagements. And the notice of intention for the bill to be introduced was only released on Friday, and it will now go through a full parliamentary process. It's probably starting off with the first reading debate, which we will be requesting, and then there will be a motion of desirability that will appear before Parliament, and that will determine the course of the bill thereafter. And as I said, fundamentally, this is something that we are going to raise within the Cabinet and within the Government of National Unity every time we start talking about transformation and economic empowerment policy. And it's not something that is simply going to evaporate into the ether once we've launched this bill. This is something we believe is a policy change that needs to take place, and we will continue advocating for the position that we've put before you today and making sure that we can start shifting the needle. I think also what's quite important and has been a notable change following President Ramaphosa as well as Minister Steenhuisen's engagement in the US was the policy directive that came from Minister Solly Malatsi regarding equity equivalence, right, which also doesn't have an ownership element to it. Just to point that out, Samkelo, is that there is definitely some realization, I think, even within the ANC itself, that the way in which transformation policy has been implemented in this country over the last 20 or so years has failed to attract the kind of investment into the key sectors that we need in order to be able to grow the economy and create jobs. And I think it's about just making sure that we force that door open and that we make sure that this is a critical policy issue that is on the table in order to ensure that we are changing things for the better rather than just maintaining the status quo. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not we get a tweet from the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula. I'm sure once you've put something onto Twitter later on today, then we should see some sort of response, because it seems as if they're the only people who are out there willing to defend their own policy these days. And I think there was a funny remark that was made several months ago where they said, well, why aren't business and why aren't beneficiaries of BEE coming out to support BEE in the way in which they did in the past? And I think that just shows you how much credibility this particular policy proposal lacks. So it's important that we continue the fight, and we look forward to the ANC's response, and we hope that they welcome it and that they want to have a conversation with us around this, because ultimately we are both here to serve South Africans. It's important that we put South Africans first, ahead of our own narrow political parties' interests. And fundamentally, the last message which I would like to share today is that this is not a case of us trying to repeat apartheid or trying to do what was done under the apartheid government led by the National Party in the Broederbond. Fundamentally, we are talking about an inclusive South Africa. In inclusive South Africa, where regardless of the circumstances of your birth, you have the same level of opportunity. Whether you live in Sandton, whether you live in Alexandria, you should be able to get access to proper schooling. You should get proper access to healthcare. You must ensure that you are also able to live a life of meaning, and that the circumstances of your birth don't trap you in poverty and unemployment. And this is the key message that we are getting out to South Africans today, is that the DA is the only party that is for all, and we are the only party that wants to make sure that we have an inclusive economy that creates jobs, generates growth, and allows each and every South African in this country to live a prosperous life. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank everybody's presence for joining us here today. I think today is it's a landmark day for us as a party, and we're very grateful that we're able to share this with South Africans, because we do believe that if indeed BEE was working for South Africans, we would not, in fact, be dealing with the economic challenges that we have in this country and the joblessness that South Africans continue to face. So we have to try something new. We have to look at new ways to help South Africans. And I think the policy that is being put forth here is for South Africans and to better the lives of South Africans. With that, I'd like to thank all the media houses who have joined us and thank South Africans at home who have stayed with us during this particular press briefing. Thank you very much. We are concluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Join the mission to rescue South Africa. Like and follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and X. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell. Join the DA, because the DA gets things done.